Hold on, I'm doing hair and makeup.
Okay, yeah, as soon as you're out of makeup, we'll get this thing started. That'd be great.
Awesome.
All right. I don't need hair or makeup, so I'm just going to go ahead and walk in and say hi. Hey, everybody. It's Andy Halko from Insivia, and
Doing hair and makeup. Hair and makeup always takes me a while, so.
And messing up our audio takes you a while, too.
Yeah. Good at that.
Well, welcome. It's Friday afternoon. We're here at Insivia, and we've got a little bit of a different view today, which is fun.
You can see the office today.
Yeah.
Kind of cool.
So just looking at a flat monitor or something like that. This is a nice
change it
view.
up, right? It's kind of fun when we do the show, like when we did the show in Utah. That was cool. That was
really cool. I enjoyed that. Yeah, that was good. But yeah, maybe people can see as our team maybe gets drunk back there at 5 o'clock on a Friday or whatever it might be.
Yeah, so happy Friday.
Happy Friday. So what are we here for today?
We are talking about positioning statements.
Positioning statements.
Yeah.
So we've been, doing brand strategy here for, what episode are we on?
This is episode 7 now.
Okay, episode 7, talking about a lot of cool stuff. I think positioning statements is where we start getting to the meat that we've been building up to with all this other stuff.
Kind of the payoff. Like you start to put the messaging out there.
And this is, positioning statements, I really think these are the things that clients are looking for because it's what we end up using on websites, on sales materials, all these other different pieces. And so I think, this is the point we built a lot, but now we're really going to turn it into something.
Very cool.
And so, just to recap, what have we gone through? We've gone through target audiences, how do you prioritize those? Then we did personas, and we really looked at like motivations and buying factors, and then
brand voice.
Then we talked about brand voice, which you love because I actually did something. Oh wait, that reminds me.
Oh man.
I know. Did you come up with a voice?
What you talking about, man?
Yeah, okay, yeah. All right, well, Tony's going to keep working on his brand voice. We talked about brand voice, which was persona, tone, language, and purpose.
Yep.
And then value propositions, which we take those buying factors and we develop value propositions to create great differentiation from you and other companies. So that was really cool. And now we're taking all of that and it's basically how do you pull out the value propositions, look at your target audiences, use your brand voice, and filter that out into positioning statements. So that's really what we're here to chit-chat about today.
Very cool.
Everybody excited? I know you are. So positioning statements, they're really that language that we want to develop that, again, we can use on websites and sales materials and all these different pieces. And I usually see them as there's a series of different core positioning statements that I like to create. And then from there, you can build out some additional messaging. And so those core positioning statement pieces are typically like your short identifier. Mm-hmm. So I really like something that's a simple 3 to 5 word statement that when you're talking to someone or using on a website, it's that short identifier of who you are. For us, we're a growth consultancy. For someone else, it might be, a data and analytics company. But it's good to define that very simple short identifier because you want something that, just in a few words, gives someone a core label about who you are and what you do.
I think on that point, it's important that the simplicity is super important.
Right.
That people understand. I see a lot of companies that just have, sometimes it's just too vague.
Yeah.
Right. It's people kind of say, well, I've heard companies say they are that, but it's kind of like too broad or too vague.
Yeah, I think there's a mix there that you wanted something that's easily recognizable, that someone can read and say, okay, I get what you are, but you also don't want it too broad that they don't understand. I mean, it's just got to be that right mix. And the magic is, they talk about labels. Whenever someone goes out and sells, your prospects and customers put you in groups and labels. And so that's really what your short identifier is. If someone goes out and says web companies or they go a marketing agency, but what you want to really do with the short identifier is give them that label that they can grasp in their head and kind of put a stake in the ground, but then adding at least a couple of words that help give differentiation
Yes.
to who you are within that.
Stands out a little bit.
Exactly. That's why with us, growth consultancy, we want to be considered a consultancy, and we're much more than an agency because we go in and do the strategy stuff. And then growth for us is about what we're focused on. So it describes, and I think people can put us in a position of like, this is what these guys do, and they understand it. But it also describes what we think makes us different. So that's a key piece. The next one for me is typically flag in the ground. So I really like for companies to define that we believe statement.
Yeah.
Like we believe in X, and this is what we stand for, and this is that heart and emotion of how you communicate your business. It's like, what are we really here for?
We talked a little bit on one of the past episodes, I don't remember if it was Vision Gap or Sasquatch, but we talked about at that point, right, flag in the ground, it could be a little bit divisive.
Yeah.
You can't be afraid of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's something to that, is that you want to be a little polarizing. You want to really attract the people that resonate with that,
Yep.
and then potentially repel people that that's not what they're looking for. And I do think, that flag in the ground for me, it is always about a little bit of the emotion and the feeling of like, we believe in changing the world through data and analytics. If you're or we believe that you can look at a problem intelligently and come up with a system to solve the problem. It's something that, that we believe statement that gives people feeling and emotion behind, this is what we really think we can accomplish and do, and why we come into work. It's a little different than your cultural why statement.
Yeah.
It's something that's more forward facing, but I really like that flag in the ground because I think in messaging, you can leverage that to take the logical pieces of what you're saying, but tie that into some of the emotional.
Yeah, that's important. That emotional hook is a great differentiator.
And then there's typically the position statement. So position statement, which we've been talking about, but for me, it's a little bit of the, why are we doing, the why, the how are we doing things. Mm-hmm. And so really it's, why we are in this business. It goes a little bit beyond. And then what we have after that is the elevator pitch. So I typically have the short identifier, flag in the ground, position statement, and then elevator pitch that basically sums it all together, that if you have 7 seconds in an elevator, how do you tell your story? Yeah. And so those are the core elements that I like to pull out, at least to create the foundation of your messaging. Now, there's still a lot more that needs to be created,
sure.
Just because you've got messages for particular products, you've got messages that you want to talk about the business, all these other things. But it's kind of like a, hierarchy, is you start with those value propositions, develop that brand voice, put it down to these high-level key positioning statements, and then all that should filter down to other messaging.
Yeah.
And again, hopefully at that point when you're creating all this stuff, all of it does still align back to those key pieces of like value propositions and stuff.
Yeah, done correctly. It's all, that's why we're building step by step.
Exactly. And I think, all of our messaging really should tie back to those value propositions. Yeah. If we're not supporting the reason that we're different in the marketplace, and whether it's talking about us, it's talking about our product, our service, it's, our team, whatever piece that we're talking about should somehow tie back to what makes us different. And so if it's methodology or it's our approach with data, whatever you've determined, if you're talking about your team and its methodology, how does your team support methodology?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's an important piece. The next that I was going to kind of chat about with you was I always like to give our audience something a little bit more concrete of how to do this. Yeah. So typically when we're talking with clients, the two things we look at to kind of inspire our positioning statements are these two, structures that we put clients through, and we ask their leadership team or other people in their group to basically fill in blanks. It's kind of Mad Libs at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And so I've got something that's called the formulaic statement, and then the problem, fix, outcome.
Cool.
And so what we typically do is sit down and ask everybody in the room to fill those out, And then that helps us pull a lot of stuff together to help create all of these different pieces. So the formulaic statement, basically it typically goes for a target audience or company. So that's the fill-in, for X. Our company or product. So is the frame of reference what we do, that the rational, emotional benefit or promise, and then because the reasons to believe the promise.
Yeah.
So there's just kind of that different layout.
Good framework.
And I'll read one real quick. So this is Apple Computers for creative individuals. So who they're targeting.
Yep.
They want to go after creative individuals. Apple Computers is the technology product, and there are a wide range of different technology products that allows you to express your creativity. So that's the frame of or the emotional benefit. And then because they look and feel different but are highly connected and intuitive. And so that because the reasons to believe. And so when you fill this out, what you typically end up doing, that rational emotional benefit is usually back to what our personas are thinking and motivations and buying factors. And then your because, your reasons to believe, are a lot of times shaped around those value propositions. And so this statement, if you can sit down and have a group of people that have gone through and talked about who are our target audiences, who are personas, motivations, buying factors, what are our value propositions, and everybody can interpret this a little bit differently and create their own statement from it, but it fits within a framework, that really helps us create an example and fodder for what we'll build with positioning statements.
Yeah.
And then the other one, the problem, fix, outcome, which is one of my favorite ones, and I think all businesses should really sit and make sure they're, kind of thinking through this problem, fix, outcome message is, well, when, problem, our fix, and then as a result, the outcome. So I'll read a good one that I like. Well, when you need to get a ride somewhere and you call a taxi, it always ends up costing more than you thought it would. So that's the problem. Our app lets regular people bid against one another to give you a ride at a fixed price in their own car. That is the fix. And then as a result, right up front exactly how much it'll cost and that you're getting the best possible deal. So obviously that's Uber.
Yep.
And it really, I think the statements like that are great because it really does describe, okay, when, what's the problem? And I love the idea of you step up to someone and they go, what do you do? Well, when people are really having a hard time defining and articulating what makes them great in the marketplace and then reaching the right people, and then you describe your fix. I think that's a great way because it frames for someone right away, this is the issue that you solve. Then it tells the fix, and then it gives you an outcome of this is what happens when you get our fix.
I do like that one, and I've used very similar kind of framework for that. It creates clarity, and it also it makes it conversational.
Yeah.
So it's easy. It's easy just to throw that out. That's how we solve this, right, or whatever it is. So I love that one.
Yeah,
really cool.
And I think that's where, as a group, if you're a company and you're thinking about doing this stuff, the great thing is get in a room with your leadership team, marketing, sales, a couple others, and have everybody fill these out. And hopefully, again, you've created the foundation of the other pieces, but fill them out. But then just when you pull it all together and you see everybody's stuff and you organize it, man, does it give you some great foundational stuff for what you can develop as your messaging for the organization. So it's really cool. So that's a great way to go about it. And then really for me, it's, again, how do you take that and now filter that out for everything else and build that hierarchy of messaging? Yeah. So
very cool.
That's positioning statements.
Wow. I love it. What's typically, would you say, is the biggest challenge you've seen with clients when it comes to developing positioning statements?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest challenge that you end up facing as an organization to do this is trying to say everything and be everything to everybody. It's the same problem that we dealt with, throughout this process. A lot of companies, they just have that hard time, I think, minimizing and simplifying how they want to define their organization. A short identifier. Well, it's a struggle to say, okay, I'm willing to define my business in 3 to 5 words, or a we believe statement. of not pouring your heart out and trying to say everything, and instead keeping that a simple flag in the ground. A flag in the ground isn't a bulldozer on the on the earth. It's a flag, and it's a small thing that you can quickly plant and say, this is it. And so I think it's that for me is helping people be able to simplify, clarify, articulate all of these things, because you have to remember your audience, attention spans, what they can consume, what they want to consume. It's not everything that you can pour out of your head and out of your heart.
And that, I've seen a lot of that where people have a hard time with the brevity.
Yes.
And so once you can get something that's short and sweet, it's not about telling the whole story. The idea is to get people to want to hear more.
Right.
And so there should be some curiosity that's there so if you tell, if you tell the whole story, it's like, okay, moving on.
Yeah.
But if you tell enough that it sparks, well, so how do you do that? Tell me more, right? You want it to be the conversation starter, whether that's an elevator pitch, we're just talking, I'm introducing myself, or if you go to my website and you read the headline, that's a positioning statement, and it's like, well, I want to learn more. So that's something that I think, as long as you understand that, it's a little easier to let go and say, okay, I can just let the statement exist on its own.
I think the conversation that's helped a lot of the people I've talked to is defining marketing language versus sales language. Marketing language, the purpose is to just gain a little bit of interest and intrigue, and then enough to convince them to take the next step.
Yeah.
And so when you start thinking in those terms, I think people get a little bit more comfortable with simplifying and saying, you're right, I'm just trying to get them salivating enough to move forward. Versus sales language, to me, is the nuance. So we describe, what makes our service or our product so beneficial that it's going to solve X problem and it's going to, make your life better. Well, the sales language is now how and why and what we've done before, and it's the nuance that you want to, add to all those pieces.
Starting to fill in those features and benefits.
Yep, and I think starting this conversation and telling people, look, positioning statements are marketing language. We're not trying to sell someone. We're not trying to close them. Mm-hmm. Don't think that you're going to put this message out there and someone's going to go, give me a contract.
So it's getting them interested.
That's right. 100%. And so I think that that's a key piece in starting this process is sit down and say, okay, we are going to have a difference between marketing and sales language. And tied to the conversation we had earlier, that doesn't mean that marketing and sales language don't need to connect or shouldn't, really tie together. Yeah. It just means that the marketing language has a purpose of gaining interest, and the sales language has the purpose of closing and convincing and those pieces. So just so important to think about that when you're doing it.
Awesome. Really good stuff. So if you haven't downloaded the Vision Gap white paper, go to visiongap.com. You can also see any of the past shows.
Yeah, check them out.
Catch up. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it, especially if you happen on this show, go back. I mean, we really built up how this is all structured and how you can really take steps to do all of this in brand strategy.
Because it sounds great to have the positioning statements, but if you just hear that, it's like, but how do I create a good one? But if you go back, it's kind of the foundation for it. It's building to that.
Well, and that's what I love about the way that we look at it. It's really this progressive thing. And I think the biggest challenge that companies have is sitting down and trying to develop a brand with a white sheet of paper. But what you have to do is you have to start at step 1, step 2, step 3, and go through, because it truly is a progressive process.
For sure.
Yeah, cool.
Very good.
This is fun. We'll be on next week. I'm not sure what the topic is off the top of my head, but we'll have some fun. Maybe we'll do something interesting, and Tony will finally have his voice.
I'll have a voice.
The rest of the next 10 episodes are going to be in search of Tony's unique voice, so that'll be fun. But yeah, go download some stuff. If you got questions, please feel free to reach out to us too. We'd love to hear from people.
Absolutely.
There's probably a contact form or email or something out there that you can reach out to us. But thanks for joining, and have a good weekend, right?
Have a great weekend, everybody.
All
See you next week.
Bye.